And so with this, I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Kurt St. Bernard. And Dr. Kurt St. Bernard is the head of public and corporate affairs at HDF Caribbean Energy. And we're excited to welcome him as an accomplished communications strategist and a regional thought leader. And he's sharing his insights and his experience on networking for success. All right. So he leads the stakeholder engagement, public diplomacy, and strategic communications for one of the region's most innovative energy firms, HDF Caribbean Energy. He has a PhD in international relations and over 2 decades of experience spanning academia, government, and industry. He truly brings a wealth of knowledge on building authentic connections that drive professional growth and organizational impact. All right, so let's welcome this powerhouse in Caribbean corporate affairs, Dr. Kurt St. Bernard, and invite him to make his presentation.
Thanks, Fayola. What is all of this about Powerhouse? Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kurt, and it is a pleasure to meet you. Some of the names look familiar to me. Some don't, but it would be great to get to do sessions like this in person where we could actually do some practice runs about networking and that kind of thing so you could see some of the more intuitive parts of networking. And you learn a lot faster that way. So for today, what I'm hoping to do is just tell you a little bit about my perspective on networking and what are some of the tools that have worked for me, by giving you a little background into my history, and then some technical teaching. I'm going to be about 15 to 20 minutes max, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. So without further ado, I will start by saying, networking is as natural to us as breathing. We are invisibly managing and engaging with networks pretty much every time we are in the company of another person. And when you're not in the company of another person, you are training yourself to network by the things you listen to, by the way you think about life, by your perspectives or that handed down to you from your parents and grandparents. As a result, don't look at networking purely as a mechanical thing. Look at it as something that you need to optimize because you're already doing it. Where I start my training, however, comes from a background in having to network slightly differently. Maybe not differently, depending on your own life experience. I have lived in Trinidad for most of my life, but I've had to do traveling for significant parts of it, including spending some years where I was out of Trinidad. And it gives you an opportunity to see what different cultures are like in relation to you. So I started networking in relation to professional demands. I used to work for BMW. At one point I was like building and racing cars. Before that, I think I was a risk manager at Royal Bank dealing with non-financial risk and crisis management. Very different environment. I was a statistician at one point dealing with predictive models for like trade for Trinidad when I was just out of university. And I used to be chief of staff at the Prime Minister's office in Trinidad for 2 prime ministers, Patrick Manning and Kamla Persad-Bissessar. After 6 years of doing that, I decided to kind of focus on my studies again. Met Fayola at the business school where We both worked for a while and focused on negotiations with an emphasis on China, because China, as you know, is probably one of the most successful negotiating countries on the planet right now. And so I did that. Then I was Marshal of the Parliament for about 7 years. And I was dealing with all the operations of the Parliament. And now I was brought in by a French hydrogen company, and that deals with clean tech on 5 continents. And I deal with aligning renewable and sustainable strategy um, from the French company side with their global um, need to align with different countries. Different countries are at different points. So a lot of times I spent in the background understanding the network and penetrating it and just making sense of it. And now I have to be a little more front facing for strategic reasons. It's not my preferred background. So if most of you don't know me, that's fine and expected, because I genuinely prefer privacy. I genuinely prefer a quiet life, walking with my dogs, and staying out of the limelight. So what I will tell you now is the professional aspects of networking by presenting to you a model that will, if you actually master it, it'll give you 3 things. One, it'll help you to be able to see almost instantly the kind of network that you're in. 2, it'll tell you what the expected behaviors of that network will be. And 3, it will also almost immediately tell you how to function in that network. So if you master it, you remove the guesswork in terms of how to navigate through the network. And it's culture proof, language proof, it's proofed against anything. It's a bold claim to make, but I've lived it. So I can say that. And when you hear it, hopefully you get to get glimpses of it as well. So I'll talk about networking and I'll share my screen so that you can get an idea of some of the things that I'm talking about right now. And you should be able to see this screen with key terms. I can't see you while I'm sharing the screen, so if you can't see it, Fiola, feel free to speak up and just say, hey, we're not seeing.
We're seeing it. All is well.
Thank you. So some of the key terms that we need to understand moving forward are the language of networking. So now when we talk about a network, we mean any node. A node is a person, a company, a country. That is any node that's connected to another node. And once we're talking about nodes and studying nodes, we mean we're talking about networks. So network analysis is simply analyzing the nature of the network. Network horizon is really understanding how far reaching your network is. Network context is an analysis of what type of network you function in and what are the circumstances that are conditioning that behavior. And network identity is the nature of the network itself. So we're going to look at some network types. So I'm giving you snapshots of a much broader topic because I'm trying to pull out the core of it just to give you enough so that you can be interested to look at it more for yourself. So some networks are formal, and a formal network is known because it has a rigid structure, there's a hierarchical formation, relationship flows are formalized, so you probably have to email your boss and then go to your boss's boss and then your boss's boss. There's a contract guiding it. or some kind of legal precedent. Formal networks tend to have barriers to entering or leaving. So for instance, like a marriage, you have a marriage certificate. There's a formal barrier to entering and a formal barrier to leaving. There's a process. And formal networks, by their nature, tend to have long organizational lifespans because it exists outside of the individuals or the agents or the companies or the countries. It exists in a formal way so that the personal whims of an individual or company or country doesn't impact it. So formal networks tend to last longer. I'll give you some examples. Professional associations, member organizations, geographically defined organizations, etc., etc., etc. As employees of an organization, you have a formal relationship with them. You provide a service, they provide a payment. All of that, all of those are examples. And what drives a formal network? Why do you join a formal network? Well, you could stay home and read books, but if you go to a university that's accredited, then you have a recognition factor that yes, you've passed through this and you have a seal of approval. So like I said earlier, I used to work for BMW. The BMW logo comes with an expectation of a certain quality. So I enter a contract with them for training because that training is recognized. But what else drives your participation in a formal network? Well, you want to be legally protected. You might want to protect your brand. You might want to be recognized in your business, and business recognition leads to revenue and economic growth. Again, recognition in general. And finally, mutually beneficial sharing of resources, results, information, and finance. So we talked about formal. Let's move very quickly on to informal because I want to leave room for your questions. An informal network, the relationship flows are fluid. The structure and hierarchy is kind of ad hoc. It tends to be very temporary in nature, and it tends towards formalization the longer they remain functional. Now, that's a key element. The longer as an informal network relationship exists, the more it will become formal and it starts to behave like a formal network. That's an important key. So if you don't want the things around you to become formalized and crystallized, then to keep them informal, you have to insist that they be short term. And protocol is important for both. Common examples of informal networks include friends and family, social networks, neighborhoods, volunteering, customers or your market, collegial associations and relationships, industry clusters. But as I said before, the longer these things stay in operation, the more they become formalized. I always like to use the example of you buy a new car and you're heading to work and you always wanted to drive your new car to work. You leave at 6 o'clock and your next door neighbor is on the corner. Do you give your neighbor a lift or not? You've made eye contact, you give them a lift. Fine. Day two, you decide you want to leave earlier because you really want to drive your new car by yourself. At 5:30, you come outside, the neighbor is waiting. You end up making eye contact, the neighbor is waving at you. You have a decision to make. It's not a formal contract, you're not a taxi, but you decide, I'll give my neighbor a lift. Day three, you decide to leave your home at 5 a.m. to accomplish your dream. But you don't realize that the light in your house, when you turn on to get ready, your neighbor sees it. So your neighbor is now planning for this. Because in your neighbor's mind, it's, well, I would love to formalize this. In your mind, you are conflicted. The rule of thumb, the longer an informal relationship structure or network structure continues to exist, the more it behaves like a formal one. What drives, however, participation in an informal network? Some people join informal networks to solve a temporary problem. or because they have some sense of empathy with the event or the moment. For socialization purposes, you know, you might join like a book club and you read a book and then you leave. You just want to socialize. Some people join informal networks for business and economic growth, for peer recognition. And this final point, you join an informal network because you want more formalization and you want more structure, but to actually formalize it might be inappropriate, unrealistic, or illegal. And I'll let you think about that because I'm sure you can come up with many ideas as to what kind of informal structure could exist, because a formal one would be inappropriate, unrealistic, or illegal. Different network types. So if I showed you an image like this, and I were to ask you, which of these seems the most informal, what would you say? And if you were thinking, well, I'm not sure what you're thinking, which one would you say is the most informal? If you're thinking mesh, then you're probably right. Because in a mesh structure, everyone can access everyone else. And some countries relate like that, communities, businesses, people. But then if I were to say, which is the most formal using the same pattern, then any of those that have a rigid structure with levels of hierarchy would all be correct. So hierarchical, extended star, anything that stops people from relating directly or companies relating directly because there's a protocol tends toward being more formal. And I will finally end by going, I'll pass over this because I just have one more slide to go. Well, one more image that I want you to see. And it's not this one. In this one, the join us is the most formal. The join in is semi-formal. And the join up is the least formal. It's more organic. There are 3 levels, and I'll close with this. 3 levels of analysis that you look for in a network to determine the nature and structure of it. And if we have more time, another time we can go through that and I'll show you how to predict it and how to behave in it. The first lens, so picture you're at the optician and they're putting on different lenses and saying, does it look better with this one or with this one? Does it look better in lens 1 or lens 2? So the first lens we're going to look at is ethical. From an ethical perspective, if you're judging a network, you can judge from a utilitarian standpoint. A utilitarian network is one that you join simply because you want to get the benefit you want. When you're done, you leave. So you go to a supermarket, you go there to buy your goods, and then you leave. There's no, excuse me, no attachment beyond that. Beyond utilitarian, if you move slightly to the right, a virtuous network is one where there's no deep relationship among the agents, but there's a shared value. So for instance, if you have a cause, like maybe Red Cross or Mothers Against Drunk Driving or something like that, you don't need to be friends with the nodes in the network, but you have a shared cause. And under the final section, under an ethical lens, you can be emotional. So if I set up a company and my company is designed to be in operation for the future of my children or my family, then that's an emotional network. And an emotional network prioritizes relationship over value add. A utilitarian network prioritizes value add over relationship, and virtuous is in the middle. So the first level is ethical analysis of your network. Here's the second level, structural. We mentioned what a formal network looks like: barriers to entry, long life, it's hard to enter, hard to leave, legal requirements, etc., etc., etc. So a formal network can be identified by length of existence, levels of administration, commitments to protocols. All of those are typified in a formal structure. Moving to the right slightly, you have semi-formal structures, which, as the name implies, may not be as rigid. The signing and the joining requirements are less, but still present. And then you have informal networks. And informal networks are ones that are just joined and you can enter and leave as you wish. It's very fluid. So, for instance, if you're in a network of barbers or bakers, but you're not in it in a legal way, you just kind of join and you log in and you participate, kind of like this class. You can, it's not really a class, but kind of like this talk. You can log in if you want to. You would still have some kind of formal measure. You still have to be approved. You have to be a member of the alumni. So it's semi-formal in some ways, but you can also leave. Informal, you wouldn't even have a requirement to do anything except come and go as you please. So, under a structural perspective, you can judge a network by levels of formality. And that's important if you want to understand how to penetrate that network. If there are people or companies or governments that you need to reach, you need to know, what's my ethical analysis of this network? What's my structural analysis of this network? And then the final level, in order to make sure your strategy is grounded, you have to look at power. Some networks are single broker, one pure power broker that determines the access and operations of every other single node in that network. So a dictatorship might work like that, or some companies function like that, some networks function like that, some countries function like that. What we say goes, everybody.
So I believe that there may be an issue with Dr. St. Bernard's connection. While we give him a few minutes to join us again, I'm going to remind you all that we do have a poll for you to complete. Dr. St. Bernard, if you're back on, let me know. We do have a poll for you to complete, which indicates what topic you would like us to see, what topic you would like us to cover in the next few webinars. Dr. St. Bernard, are you back?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was gone. I didn't.
Yes.
What was the last thing you heard?
It was that last slide, and I can't recall exactly what you were talking about.
So how long ago? 30 seconds, 1 minute?
30 seconds.
Okay. Well, I think if it's in the last 30 seconds, then you would have gotten the 3x3 matrix. So I'll stop there and see if anyone has questions, comments, thoughts.
Okay, great. I'm seeing a question in the chat immediately asking if you could repeat the power slide.
Okay. Not a problem at all. Give me 1 second. That was the last one. Single broker means one power broker that determines the operations of every other node in the network. Oligopolistic means you have a couple. So for instance, we don't have many conglomerates in Trinidad, but we do have a few. So that's an oligopolistic kind of network. And multi-broker is where all of the nodes in the network have relatively the same amount of power. So for instance, if you take taxis and you go to a taxi stand and there are multiple taxis there, none of them have relatively much more power than the other. You can choose to go in any and have the same experience, and you have the power of choice. So a multi-broker network tends to be more organic and more chaotic in some ways, but sometimes it's better for the client. So power helps you to determine who is the target that you need to persuade if you need to get something accomplished in that network. Oligopolistic multi-broker, it's all about strategy. So what I was saying is you have to judge your network from ethics, structure, and power, and hopefully you'll come up with a brilliant strategy to accomplish your goals. So I hope that cleared up the last slide. Yes.
Okay, great.
Now, bearing in
Thank you
mind
very
what I
much for
tried to
that.
do in 25 minutes is something that normally takes about 6 months. So it's quite
Well,
understandable if you didn't get it all.
that's okay. We appreciate the condensed version of the background of networks. And as we're talking about networking for success, I just want to remind persons that if they do have questions, please post it in the chat. And to kick things off, I do have a question, Dr. St. Bernard. For those in the audience who might be introverted or new to professional networking, what would be your top 1 or 2 actionable tips to confidently initiate connections and to make a memorable first impression?
So I would say 2 things to that. One, study your network using some of these tools. And 2, practice, like physically practice. For some people, especially if your personality is less open, and I am not the most open person, but I have practiced. You face the discomfort. So if we had an opportunity to run this, say, for instance, in a class scenario, I would literally do an exercise where I would line the class up facing each other one-to-one. And I would say, without warning, present a pitch to this person to try to convince them to invest in your business that you made up on the spot. Because it's not about how creatively you can make up a business or argue it. It's about how you assess how you respond in a stressful situation. If you understand how your mind and body works in a stressful situation and you practice it and you become more aware of it, it's a very useful tool to have. So there's some divisions of the US military where you have to take an EpiPen and stab yourself multiple times with nothing in it, just so you get used to needles sticking you all the time. You do that over and over and over. Or if, unfortunately, you say you have a diabetic in your family, you notice how a needle doesn't bother them. Whatever you practice, you become proficient at. So if your need is to be more interactive, you're not going to get more interactive by just studying the method. You have to force yourself to practice, and then it becomes second nature. So I would say that those 2 things.
Okay, great. I think those are really good examples in order to practice and put yourself out there and put yourself in uncomfortable situations so that it becomes more comfortable for you. All right. Another question that I have is, given the rise of digital platforms and remote work, how do you see the art of networking evolving? What are some key strategies for building and maintaining strong professional relationships in a predominantly virtual or hybrid environment?
Again, an amazing question. I think where we are at right now, we're just beginning to see that. So it's not yet so. For instance, I'll use my structure as an example. I work for a French company based in Bordeaux. I go to Bordeaux physically maybe once or twice for the year. I also work with a regional team, and so I travel to different countries in the region like every 6 to 8 weeks. Most of the time in between that is spent in hybrid meetings, online meetings, etc. The rise of digital tech, and in my case, more particularly artificial intelligence, allows me to focus on high order skills. So I don't need to do a lot of administrative tasks. I don't need to do a lot of basic research. I don't need to do a lot of documentation like I used to do. Like if I had to write a prime minister of another country, I would take a while and do my research. Now I can pull that data a lot more quickly, which allows me to now be able to focus on other things at a higher order. So I don't think the time is yet where we completely replace the need for proper human interaction, but I absolutely feel like if we need to twin those skills and become more effective at twinning them, we'll never, at least not yet in my lifetime, replace the human, the advantage that the human interaction brings, because your body is much more perceptive and proprioceptive than we're aware of. Like, you know, when you walk into a room, sometimes you can feel the energy, or you look at somebody for the first time and you could tell, I wonder if something is right. Or you hear like something just clicked. Those processes that are happening at the higher order of your brain can't yet be replaced by any form of digital tech. And so the goal is to use the tech as a tool while improving on the higher order skills. So I don't see them replacing each other. I just see them working more closely together.
Okay. And as we have in the chat, a number of persons are putting their LinkedIn profile links, and I appreciate that because it is a networking session. This other
Sure.
question kind of piggybacks on that. Dr. St. Bernard, once a connection is made, what are the most effective strategies for nurturing and maintaining a long-term mutually beneficial professional relationship beyond just an initial handshake or a LinkedIn request?
I would say 90% of my relationship building happens in my head, 10% happens in person. So for instance, I'll use Fiola as an example. I've known Fiola from maybe 2014 to now, so maybe 11 years. I don't see Fiola on a monthly basis even. We might see each other, I don't know, every 2 years.
Yeah, pretty
However,
much.
right, maybe every 2 years. However, the relationship is authentic. You need to do a guest speaking on anything. It's coming from somebody who understands quickly the environment I'd be comfortable in. And even if they don't, they understand me well enough to know that I will give an honest answer. And so it's authentic. That authenticity isn't built by many, many hours of inane messages and Instagram posts. That might just put me to sleep. I don't have time for that. It's built by meaningful interactions. So, for instance, I might see at an event and I might see our children might be swimming or something like that. And it's like, we get a moment to talk and it's authentic. Try to build authenticity. Try to build authenticity. If you don't have authenticity, it will be strained, it will be uncomfortable, and it will be always something that you want to wrap up quickly. So my advice is, if you have to build authentically. Don't overdo it. Less is more. So you join somebody on LinkedIn, hey, really nice to catch up with you, or really nice to meet you. But 90% of it has to be, well, what are you wanting out of this relationship? Have you read about the person? Have you seen what they're involved in? Have you read their profile? Is there any intersection between what they did and what you did, or what they did and what you want to do? Try to set up a conversation. Make it happen quickly. Assess the person very quickly if it's something that you feel has merit. And if it doesn't, don't try to force it. Some of the skills required, therefore, are politeness. Don't be like, some people are kind of a little too blunt. So don't be blunt, don't be rude. You're meeting somebody, so still be polite, still be courteous. If it works out, great. And if it doesn't, really nice chatting with you. I hope we get to connect another time. In English, what that actually means is, well, maybe we'll never talk again, but it was nice, and have a good life. but you have to learn how to communicate with people in a way that's not offensive and not blunt. So be authentic, be genuinely informed, don't just reach out and be random, and be polite. I think those three rules will assist you not just in on LinkedIn, but just in life. You know, when you're going for a job, you read up about the company. I go deep. I want to know who are the people in charge of the company. How did they get there? What kind of hobbies did they have? Are they into sports? What are they into? So that when I see them for the first time, I can make a conversation happen based on something I'm genuinely interested in. So if you're interested in the history of typewriters, and I see that on your deep search, chances are I won't bring it up because I am not interested in the history of typewriters. And if I bring it up, it will have to be based on something that is genuinely interesting. Otherwise, it just won't come up. 90% here, 10% here. And that's a simple rule of thumb.
Interesting. So I feel like if I'm learning as well in this session, a question that we have in the chat coming from Jameson Cooper is, what are some effective ways to immerse myself in communities or circles that align with my goals and offer meaningful networking opportunities?
Well, again, a good question. You have to study the network. So let's say any network that you think is important to join, the first thing you need to do is study it using the same tools I just identified. From an ethical perspective, is this network utilitarian, where everybody is for themselves? Is it virtuous? Is it emotional? What are the drivers of that network? How does it intersect? Who are the key people? What are their interests? What are their kind of network behaviors? Are they single broker and they don't want anybody approaching them outside of this hierarchy? Like, don't come to me unless you go through these people. Or are they more informal and multi-broker, so you can just approach them and there will be no offense created? I would say never underestimate study. In another field, you will call it intel gathering. In another field, you will call it other words. But you have to make sure you study it. You have to make sure you understand what you're doing. So unless you are exceptionally gifted that you can just jump into a network and make it your own, I would always advise pay attention. Use some of the tools that you hear about and try to make sense of it. Understanding the network is the first step in coming up with a network strategy. And a network strategy is an approach that identifies what's the nature of the network, what are the drivers of the network, and how best to penetrate. So you can penetrate any network with enough study, enough patience, and enough knowledge and behavioral skill. It's not the hardest thing to do, but you must start with understanding the network. So some people think, well, I'll join the Rotary because maybe that network gives me access to this. Maybe it does, but maybe something else might give you access to it that might be cheaper, faster, more direct. You might want to do business in Guyana. You might think, well, okay, let me go to the Chamber of Commerce. Maybe the president of Guyana has a relative in the business school or in your school, and it might be a better way to do it informally and build an emotional network and build trust. So you have to study, you have to analyze, know your resources. So I hope that helps.
Okay. In COSTAATT, we have many alumni that are looking to transition or advance in their careers. What are some effective ways for them to leverage the COSTAATT Alumni Network, specifically for career opportunities or industry insights?
So I would say, one, very good question. And two, a year ago, I would not have been able to say this. Today, I can say I start with Claude.ai or ChatGPT or one of these, and you learn to develop prompts. If you learn to develop the right questions, you get some amazing answers. So I would turn that question into an AI prompt and say, I am a member of the COSTAATT Alumni. I'm interested in transitioning in my professional career, and I'm desirous of meeting some of the key people and coming up with a networking strategy to assist me in making a transition in 6 months. My own qualifications are in my attached resume. Give me concrete strategies on how to do that, and give me 3 leading questions at the end of each iteration to help me shape my approach. I would do that as a starting point because it's kind of quick and easy and you can start getting ideas immediately. If I didn't have access to those tools or I weren't comfortable, I would call the president of the Alumni Association and have a conversation over a cup of coffee and say, listen, I want to start attending some of these networking alumni events more purposefully. Please keep me in the loop. Let me get involved. Maybe I'll start coordinating. And then, just as people are doing here, you take their LinkedIn profile so that you can use the LinkedIn search engine and see what field you want to go in and which of these new connections are in that field. And you set up strategic conversations. So you're both using artificial intelligence and natural intelligence to do your research, build your relationships, and again, be organic, be authentic, and be researched. And I think you have more than enough insider there to start developing a network strategy.
Okay. A question in the chat from Stacy Ramon asked, how can you evaluate your network to ensure your network is supporting your goals?
Good question. So that starts from your earlier research. If let's say you do some research and your network is utilitarian, meaning that network functions when the people in it get what they want, they're gone. If you do research and you recognize that network behavior is utilitarian, then you have to prepare for it and almost expect that they'll behave in that way. If you do your research and you realize that that network that you're in is formal, then what it means is once you meet their barriers for entry, chances are you'll be in it for a while. And so you can then have more time to strategize. So you're assessing 2 things. One, the nature of the network. And then once you're in it, you're assessing the nature of the individuals, which is the more complicated part. Because you have people who are very utilitarian in an emotional network, or you can have people who are very formal in an informal network. So they might want to organize uh, a children's party, but you have to sign documents and disclaimers, and you have to present 2 forms of ID and insurance so that if anything happens to one of the children at the party, they waive you could be very formal in an emotional, informal network. So 1, you have to study the network, and 2, once you're in, you have to study the nature of the nodes inside the network. So it's another layer of analysis, because what I presented to you and the way I presented it to you is not how it actually behaves. That's so you can understand it conceptually. The way it actually behaves is somebody is amazing in the office and terrible on the football field, or they could be amazing with their family and a tyrant in the office. People don't fit in one box per se. So at the next level of analysis, you're both studying the network and the node, the structure and the agent. And that has to happen constantly. It becomes second nature after a while, but that does that's what is required, basically.
Okay, great. There's another question. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm just
No,
saying
no,
there's
no.
no quick fix.
Okay. So there's another question in the chat that I find is very interesting. And it deals with formal structure. Within a formal structure, can networking, apologies, it is giving trouble for me to view the question. And for some reason, it's not allowing me to view the question. Hold on 1 second. Okay.
Sure.
Within formal structure, can networking be a key to managing the success of strategic management?
I guess yes. If strategic management is your goal and you want to leverage your understanding of the network to achieve your goal, then the answer would absolutely be yes. Now, will strategic networking alone help you to achieve your goal? Maybe not. But what it will do is it will put you in touch with the resources and people that can support that cause. So, networking is just one of an array of tools that you have to use to navigate. What networking does is it brings you into proximity with the people who can help you accomplish your goals. It also helps you to understand the opportunities that might exist from a lot closer vantage point. But ultimately, it's a tool that sits alongside a whole range of others. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but I hope I am. So if there's a clarification, then you feel free to share.
Okay. So I'm waiting to see if there's any other clarification, but while we're waiting for that, I see there is a lot of communication, and I think as a networking webinar, it would be great if we could take this online webinar into something more physical. So what I am going to do is actually launch a poll asking for persons who are here in the chat if you would be interested in participating in an in-person alumni networking event, and particularly which of our campuses might be most suitable for you. This will help us in our future planning for alumni activities. And as we talk about in-person networking, here's another question. What is one common networking mistake you observe? And what practical advice can you offer our audience to avoid that pitfall and turn potential awkward moments into productive interactions?
I love that question. So, one thing that I observe a lot in that's a common mistake in networking is not knowing how to decenter yourself and speak to the person from their perspective. Most people enter a network relationship talking to the person from your own perspective. And it's natural because you're an expert in you. And so most people, because you're an expert in who you approach a networking interaction a lot from who you are or who you think you are and what might have worked for you in the past. And so, what that does, and I'm not saying you shouldn't know who you are and what your triggers are, that's very important. But you can't presume that what's important to you is important to the person you're talking to. I used to work for different prime ministers, as I mentioned before. And we would have heads of government CARICOM meetings. And an executive who spent his life studying climate change went in to speak to the 13 prime ministers and came back out after 10 minutes very frustrated. And he said to me, "How do you get prime ministers to listen? How do you get them to listen? I'm trying to present and I only got to one slide." And I said to him, my rule of thumb is if you can't say what you want to communicate in 30 seconds or less, you don't know it well enough. Now, it takes brutal discipline to shut down all the energy and the passion and the everything that you have studied. You have studied this and you want to communicate, and they tell you, okay, you have 3 minutes. And you have to kind of compress your life into 3 minutes. But you have to understand the need of the person you're talking to more than your own. If you don't, then you'll make the mistake that most people make. And that's the challenge. I don't know if you can hear me. Am I still connected?
You are still very connected. We are still hearing your insights and your input. And
Okay, I just wondered, yes. So that is a common mistake that I hear all the time, that you have not decentered yourself enough to be able to talk and hear the other person's perspective because you're so busy hearing your own.
that's interesting. So this kind of leads into another question that I have in terms of, other person's perspective, and listening for that and not your own. But I find that many people find the idea of particularly self-promotion being very uncomfortable for them. How can our alumni authentically articulate their value and achievements in a networking conversation without sounding boastful or insincere?
That's a good question, because a lot of people do sound boastful or insincere. Um, Now, I want to say that there is a generation on the earth now that doesn't think like that. The idea of not being self-promoting is just ridiculous, because they have huge followings based on being self-promoting. And when you have huge followings and you're an influencer, then you're expected to be kind of audacious or a bit bombastic, because that's what gets you money. But if the kind of network that you want to join is a network that is not like that, and like a professional network, a little more reserved, more conservative, more long term, more that kind of network, then you have to use the right language. Now, again, a year ago, I couldn't say this. I would start with, if you really don't know how to do it, go to ChatGPT, write and write me a demure LinkedIn ready post that communicates what I was able to do without sounding egotistical and self-centered, and see what suggestions come up. For me personally, I don't post on LinkedIn about myself. I've only ever written recommendations for other people, but that's because I prefer to live in relative privacy. So I might write you an email one on one, but I don't necessarily post about me. I might like something, but that's just who I am. But if you are somebody who wants to be recognized for something for commercial value, then just find a way to do it. And then when you see something being overused, avoid it. So, people would use things like, I'm so humbled to have represented this as the only person ever in my lifetime in this world to ever say these words in sequence. I'm so proud to be given a lifetime award for being the smartest woman alive to have ever done these things. Or I'm so humbled by this great honor that I have to boast about it. Don't use language that becomes tiring. Be creative. And you have tools like AI to help you be creative. Because after a while, especially if it's frequently, if every 3 days you're posting up, I'm proud that I just got a new qualification in being able to snap my fingers. Tomorrow, I'm proud I got a new qualification in folding clothes using the Hannah method. I'm a certified hairstylist on Wednesday. After a while, it becomes too much. My advice would be, don't bombard people. You know, take the thing in strides, because it's like a conversation. If you're talking and the other person isn't getting a chance to hear and process what you're saying and respond to it, then it becomes almost like, oh, this person is always putting up things. So you have to be aware that you're dealing with real people. And in my case, there's no one I've added on my profile that I have not studied. So if you want to add somebody like me, know that the nature of me as well. Who is this person? Who is Fiola Nicholas? Why did she add me? What's her career like? What's she interested in? And I leave it at level one. If, however, she says she wishes to have a meeting to discuss things, then I go to level two. Well, okay, where does she live? What are her allergies? How many children does no, 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 that's level five. And that's for a whole different purpose. But don't bombard people who you don't know. Know the people you're talking to. And if you oversell a thing, it's just as bad as not selling at all. So you find the right balance. You find your stride, and talk to people, see what other people are doing, look at trends, look at analytics. Those things are available now to tell, well, how often does this person post? When is the best time to post? Use AI. Use AI, right? Use AI. It helps.
Okay, great. And I think that's it in terms of questions. And so I'd like to thank Dr. Kurt St. Bernard for sharing his thoughts, his insights, his expertise from the presentation, and then answering our very, very plain questions
Amazing
from
questions.
myself, and then also from the audience. I think it addressed a lot of the concerns that we have as humans in terms of networking, which is an area that a lot of people feel uncomfortable with. But one thing that I say going into new situations and circumstances where I myself don't know people is that a stranger is a friend I have not met yet. And so if it's any consolation, everyone feels the same fears and insecurities in the networking environment. And we are all looking to network. Okay. All right, great. So I would like to thank everyone for joining us here today. We do have that second poll up with regards to in-person networking and where you would like to have it. I also see the comments in the chat indicating that persons would also like to have an online opportunity to network. And so we are considering all of these for future networking opportunities and events for our COSTAATT alumni. It will not be a one and done. It will be a continued effort over the next year plus as we try to reinvigorate our alumni through our webinar series, as well as through events and activities that are relevant to you and your career development. So thank you very much, Dr. Kurt St. Bernard. For those that have asked about the recording, it will be uploaded to our social media platforms, probably in about a week. And all persons that have registered for the webinar will be sent an email informing them that the webinar is uploaded and available for them to view. So thank you very much to Dr. Kurt St. Bernard and everyone who joined us here for this lunchtime session. And I wish you all a great Friday and weekend ahead.